All right, next we have Andrew Simpson, who's a Ph.D. student at South Dakota State University.
All right, so this work was done by myself with my advisor, Dr. Semhar Michael, and this is on clustering singular and non-singular covariance matrices, particularly for use in classification. Just a quick acknowledgement, this work was partially funded by the NSF NRT program, so you see the recommendations or conclusions are those of the authors only. So kind of just a little bit of background of kind of where this problem arises is we are often dealing with these forensic identification of source problems. And in these situations, the data sets to have a very similar structure in that we tend to have a high dimensional space. We tend to have a lot of classes. Oftentimes we just assume our number of classes is going to infinity. And then kind of the catch is that every class only has a few observations. So 3, 4, 5 observations to work with for every class. And so just one example here, kind of a low dimensional space for illustrative purposes, is this plot here where we see 30 classes, which are each of those ellipses. And then each of those has 3 observations. And so one thing you might say if you want to build a classifier for this data set is just say, okay, let's do QDA, quadratic discriminant analysis. Well, given our sample size for each class, this is actually going to yield singular covariance matrices for our classes, i.e. we're going to have degenerate densities and likelihood structures and stuff like that. So oftentimes we have to fall back on doing some sort of pooling between classes and pool information in order to get parameter estimates or stable estimates for our parameters. So one thing you can do is use LDA, linear discriminant analysis. But what this is going to do is assume you have a shared covariance matrix between all of your classes, which can be a very strong assumption to make. So kind of the one thing we're going to do and propose here is, okay, what if we have clusters of covariance matrices within our data set? And so now if you look at this, this plot here, we have our 30 classes, where now each color is representing a cluster where classes of the same color have the same covariance matrix. So you'll see the black classes have the same covariance structure and the green classes have the same covariance structure, etc. And so this is where we want to go. We want to figure out how we can kind of extract this from the data and build up our classifiers that way. So just kind of a little overview of the models. We can do some comparisons. So with linear discriminant analysis, what you're doing is you're going to assume your data follows a multivariate normal. You're going to assume that each class has a unique mean, but you're going to assume that all classes share that same exact covariance structure or covariance matrix. With QDA, what you do now is you again assume each class has its own unique mean, and you also assume that each class has its own unique covariance matrix. And so what we want to do is kind of do something in between these two. And so this is our proposed method, which we just called latent covariance discriminant analysis, where now we're going to assume there's a finite number of covariance matrices shared between all classes. So just imagine you have a bag over here of different covariance matrices. Let's just suppose there's 3 covariance matrices in this bag. For every class, we go and we reach into this bag, we randomly grab a covariance matrix, and we boom, slap it onto that class, and we're off to the races. And so obviously that's something we don't observe in the data set, so it's a latent variable, which is represented by this ZI here. And so that's just controlling which class has what covariance matrix. And so we want to find maximum likelihood estimates for this model. And if you're familiar with mixture models or anything like that, a lot of times you don't have closed form solutions. Same problem here. So we rely on an expectation maximization algorithm, EM algorithm, if you're familiar, where you just, if you're not, you essentially split up into 2 steps here, which you have to derive given your model, this E step and M step, and you iterate between these two, and under the right conditions, you'll converge to maximum likelihood estimates. And so we just did a little simulation study. I'm going to skip over a lot of information here just for time, but again, I'll have a poster as well. But we just want to do a quick simulation study looking at the out-of-sample classification rate and compare LDA to this LCDA. And just the big takeaway here is that we have classification rate or accuracy on the y-axis, and our red here is our proposed method, and we see that just continually dominating LDA in this simulation study we conducted. But simulations are great. The real perfectly structured and everything's wonderful, and oftentimes real data isn't so nice to us. So let's move on, have some fun with the real data set here. And so this is a glass data set, particularly Zadora glass data set. And so what's in this data set is 200 windows with 4 fragments from each window. Our windows are going to be our classes, and our fragments are our observations from each class. So just think of a burglary, right? Broken window, glass found on the suspect's shoe. Did the glass found on the suspect's shoe come from the window at the house? You know, it's kind of the question you're trying to get at, right? So 200 classes, that's a lot of classes, a large classification problem. There's 7-dimensional space, which you can see here. And so what we can do is we can take each of these classes, and we're going to calculate the sample covariance estimate for each class, and we're going to plot it. And this is what we get. So pretty chaotic, a lot happening, a lot of overlap. Stuff is all over the place, and again, simulated data never looks like this almost, and so this is what happens with real data, I guess. So just to kind of figure out what's happening here, we're just going to take all of these ellipses, these contours of the distributions, and we're just going to center them at 0. And we get this plot we see at the top with these black ellipses here. And what you can start to see is you start to see groupings of covariance matrices. So if you look at maybe this one right here, you see you have clusters of covariance matrices that are kind of left to right and thicker, and then you have this band in the middle that's really tall and skinny, right? So you can already see these clusters of covariance matrices showing up. And so when we do our algorithm here, we are clustering these covariance matrices based on their similarity. Note that we're not clustering how you'd normally think, like where things are locationally in space. Our objects we're clustering are positive semi-definite symmetric matrices, right? And so when we do LDA, what we're doing essentially is just taking the average of all those black ellipses, and we get this red line, the red ellipse that we see on these plots. And so obviously that's kind of where that strong assumption of doing something like linear discriminant analysis is coming in. So when we do our method, we're doing this clustering of these different covariance matrices. In this case, we just assumed there were 5 latent covariance matrices floating around. And so now we see that we're kind of capturing some of this unique structure. So if you look at this one, for example, you'll see you have that red covariance matrix that's thin and kind of going left to right. And then you have another covariance matrix that is capturing the classes that have more top to bottom covariance structures. And so we just did a leave one out cross validation for this. LDA gives 43%, and our method jumps up to 57%, which isn't a bad jump given we have 200 classes we're trying to classify here. So not bad, kind of some initial results of what we've been working on. It's just a conclusion, but that's kind of what I got. Here are some references. So thank you.